Thank you very much, Taoiseach. We go now to Deputy Richard Boyd-Barrett, please.
Thanks, Taoiseach. One of the depressing things about the instance of cronyism involving Minister Coveney is that it deflects attention at the beginning of the Dáil term away from the issues that really people out there expect us to be dealing with and the crises that they expect us to resolve. And one of those is being highlighted at 5:30 this evening by the National Housing and Homeless Coalition, who will be gathering in a demonstration appealing to this government to break from the failed policies that it has applied to address the housing crisis and to actually deliver the public and affordable housing, the affordable rents, the answers to the homelessness crisis that people out there are demanding. And at that protest, there will be many groups who are affected by the 10 years of failure by both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in government to address the housing crisis. Those affected by the MICA issue, renters who are paying extortionate rents, working people who have no chance of getting on the housing ladder because of unaffordable prices, those waiting a decade and sometimes 2 decades on housing lists, people actually homeless, and many others. But one group I particularly want to highlight in the few weeks that we're going through at the moment is the student accommodation crisis, which is absolutely dire, where we are facing an unprecedented crisis in terms of the availability of affordable student accommodation. The student unions in Dublin, in Galway, in Limerick, in Sligo and many other places are absolutely overwhelmed now with thousands of students who cannot find affordable accommodation. The disease of unaffordable rents that has contributed so much to the housing crisis in wider society is now infecting our student population and indeed our student campuses, the on-campus accommodation, and pricing students completely out of the market of affordable student accommodation. And the consequences are record levels of homelessness among students, sleeping on couches, in friends' homes and so on, being forced into hotels where they're paying up to €400 a week for student accommodation, or for accommodation in hotels, or simply not being able to find accommodation and having to commute 2, 3 and sometimes 4 hours back and forward a day because they can't get accommodation near their college. Now, why is this happening, Taoiseach? And I want to put it to you, it's to do with the failures of government policy, replicating themselves now in the student accommodation issue. In UCD, a publicly funded college, they have increased student accommodation costs by about 20 to 30%, and in the newly constructed student accommodation, they are charging up to €15,000 a year for accommodation.
Time is up.
And similarly, around this city, we have privately investor-built student accommodation where they are charging €1,000 a month and more for student accommodation. In other words, housing for profit, not for students, creating a massive student accommodation crisis.
Taoiseach.
What are you going to do about it, Taoiseach?
Taoiseach, please.
First point I would make, Deputy, is that in relation to the homelessness issue which you've raised in the first part of your question, government, in terms of this Housing for All strategy, by the way, has fundamentally changed the state's approach to housing. €4 billion per annum will now be allocated to increasing housing supply, from social housing, affordable housing, cost rental and private sector housing. And we need housing supply to increase under all headings. And a wide range of measures are going to be introduced. The legislative underpinning for those measures has already been passed through the Oireachtas in the majority of cases. And part of the Housing for All strategy is the elimination of homelessness over the next decade, a total elimination. We've committed and signed up to that. Now, progress has been made in the last year. Fianna Fáil is only in government, by the way, for the last 12 months, 14, 15 months now. Hasn't been in government for 10 years, as you glibly kind of throw out all of the time. And we do need to increase investment in housing to get supply. Supply is the big issue for us. The numbers of people in emergency accommodation has fallen by 7% in the past year. The current number of homeless individuals, 8,132, represents a reduction of 23% from the 10,500 people that were recorded in October 2019, which was the highest number recorded to date. The current level of family homelessness is 48% below the peak figure recorded in July of 2018. And for us, the Housing First strategy is the key instrument to dealing with homelessness. And we're working with the non-government organisations and the approved housing bodies in the homeless area in terms of significantly increasing supply and providing them with the resources, particularly in terms of the Housing First approach, which I think most people accept is the preferable way to deal with homelessness in this country. And that is something that we're very, very committed to, and I know the Minister for Housing, Darragh O'Brien, is certainly committed to in relation to dealing with. In terms of student accommodation, the Minister did bring in legislation in terms of the Residential Tenancy Act to protect tenants, including students. And we're also giving the capacity to the Institutes of Technology to borrow, for example, to create additional student accommodation supply for students attending the technological universities and indeed the institutes, who for many years didn't have that capacity that universities had. Now we'll be keeping a close eye on the third level colleges, that they do not charge exorbitant rates to students, and that we do, obviously the broader housing issue impacts on this, because the more housing we develop, the greater capacity we develop in the market in terms of students being able to access at an affordable rate. At the moment, we do not have the supply that we need. We need to be building far more units across the board than we're currently building. Housing for All sets out a programme to do just that with very significant resources allocated.
Deputy Boyd-Barrett.
Yeah, look, we'll debate the detail of Housing for All on another day, but I'll just tell you this. I'm on the Budget Scrutiny Committee, and according to the Parliamentary Budget Office, there isn't going to be 4 billion of government expenditure into Housing for All. There's going to be about 2.5 billion direct exchequer funding, and the rest you're essentially hoping to get from the private sector. But I'll leave that for another day. The point I'm making is that the reason we have a housing crisis in general, and specifically a student accommodation crisis, is because what is being built is for profit and it is unaffordable. This city is littered with new developments of highly expensive, unaffordable, private investor built student accommodation that is €1,000 and more a month. It is also littered with new hotels who are now being rented to students who can't find affordable accommodation. And do you know how many hotel rooms are going to be built additionally, or that are in the planning system over the next while in this country? 18,000 new hotel rooms. In this city, between now and 2023, there's going to be 24 new hotels, and we've already had a lot of new hotels built, another 4,500 rooms. All that building capacity going into building stuff for profit, but not going into building the affordable student accommodation that we actually need, that people can afford. And now that disease is spreading onto the college campuses, with UCD building student accommodation for €14,000 a year. Completely unaffordable. What are you going to do about it?
Taoiseach.
Well, as I said, in the first instance, the juxtaposition of the tourism industry expanding and developing accommodation for the tourism industry and paralleling that with students, I don't accept that juxtaposition of the two. The tourism industry will grow and develop in terms of creating employment and so on. We want that to happen. We don't want students renting hotel rooms. We don't want students renting hotel rooms. We want proper, purpose-built, affordable accommodation for students. And that's what Housing for All aims to do. And that is the agenda. The most effective way of dealing with all manifestations of the housing crisis, be it student accommodation, be it homelessness, be it the lack of affordability, is to build far more houses than we are currently building, and units as well in terms of apartments. That is the key to it. And there's a comprehensive range of measures in Housing for All to do that. The issues will be capacity constraints, making sure we have workforce in place to build the scale of what we want to build. And those are the challenges, and that's why we have set up a delivery model to make sure that all aspects of delivering the Housing for All are attended to and are dealt with and are addressed.
Time is up.